Have you ever felt that your avoidant partner could flip a switch? One day they'll be loving and caring, and the next, distant and cold. And it makes you wonder how someone can flip that switch so easily. You know, for months or weeks, he or she proved me that she cared, or he cared. And this phenomenon is what we call compartmentalization. It's very hard for me to say this word, but it's basically having the ability to put things into boxes. It's easier for me to say this. So in this video, I will unpack how avoidance can separate these two worlds. This video will be helpful if you want to make sense of the situation and really learn about yourself and your relationship. I'll explain everything after the jingle. So the typical phenomenon is that, first of all, love and independence are separate. We, avoidants, are always scared of losing our autonomy. We want to do things on our own. That's the default position. Obviously, we need to work towards it, and that's what I do as a former dismissive avoidant. And as I said, we keep things separate to feel safe and also feel a sense of control. And so, in a way, being in a relationship, loving someone, having someone loving you, is a threat to the sense of self-sufficiency. Okay, because if you depend on me, I have a role and I have a responsibility, right? And so the relationship, there's a conflict between being in a relationship and their deep belief around self-sufficiency. And so sometimes, if you don't understand their attachment, if you don't leave them their space to breathe, they will feel the relationship is a duty. I have to. And that's the work that I do with my clients when we try to repair a relationship. We need to shift their mindset to I have to I want to, right? And sometimes it's a question of changing a little bit how we communicate. Sometimes reducing the what we call protest behaviors in the dynamic of relationships, of anxious avoidant dynamic. And sometimes they're just not partner material. You know, if you've been in a relationship with someone who has only had short-term relationships. I had the case recently of someone, he was 70 or 65, and he never had like long-term relationships. So to me, that tells something. And so my client tried to work things out with him, but at some stage we realized that no, it's not that he's too old to change, but it's like there's a pattern here. Maybe we can try to change the course of things, but sometimes we can't, and we need to accept this. Another thing that the mental construct of avoidance is that we feel the need to put emotional walls in order to have the distance. Being vulnerable, even talking about it is difficult, trigger that sense of engulfment. So engulfment is that we lose ourselves in the relationship. Again, that's like I'm losing my identity. I become one with the partner, which is something anxious people love and aspire to do, which is quite unhealthy in a way. But it's like losing myself in this relationship. I lose my identity. The we replaces the I. And so what we do is like we distance ourselves. Oh, you know, I don't want to show my emotion. I don't want to show that I'm scared. I don't want to show my vulnerability. Also, putting the distance is like, you know, if I do the bare minimum, people will not ask me things that I can't give you. And that's why sometimes we might hear, I can't give you what you want. Okay? So two options. When people say I can't give you what you want, you don't ask for anything, or you walk away. These are the two extremes. So usually what happens is that if you have an anxious attachment style, there are insecurities you need to address. By addressing those insecurities, maybe you can emotional regulation and communicate better, and also understanding their world, you can accommodate things and have strict boundaries and create the right relationship. Maybe that's not enough, and then you walk away. Emotions for me, for a very long time, were a liability. I thought, what's the point? Right? Obviously, you see the point when you're happy, the positive emotions, but I wouldn't allow myself to be sad, frustrated. I would always like put things on the side. And it took me a while and, and some years of therapy to realize the importance of emotion, especially when it comes to building intimate relationship. And so it's also understanding this element of like, I put things into boxes, I detach myself, and I'm scared of a feeling. And obviously it's something that I've done, and anybody can do it. If I've done it, anybody can do it. It took me years, and now that I'm a therapist, and I've worked with a lot of people, and having studied the topic in depth, it doesn't have to take years, luckily, if it's just about attachment. What happens as well, and that's very that's what happened to me, is it's a habit of suppressing feelings. I feel in control if everything is flat, if stable. Right, I feel in control. It's almost like I want to be a poker player, right? I want to be cool and composed. That's my ideal, That was also, it needs to be my personality, because I had this idea that if you want to be, successful, seen as charismatic, and all those qualities that I had that I dreamed of when I was a teenager, I need to be, strong people. In the books and movies, and they're regulate and they're strong. They don't show their weaknesses. Maybe now it's less the case. But back in the days, in the 90s, that was slightly different. And so what would happen, and I think there's a very famous study that I always refer to, and I will put the reference in the description. We rationalize love instead of fully feeling it. We dismiss things. And expressing feelings feels unsafe. So for the last one, very often I catch myself thinking about something nice to say to my partner, to my friends, to my kids, and thinking like, no, I can't tell that. Right? Feeling awkward. Even like to my kids, like, it feels, now I know that it's a construct and I can work on that. And I'm aware of that. That's also key. It's about awareness. Even telling them, I love you, is difficult. It sounds weird because I love them. I'm their dad and I really get along well with them and they get along really well with me. But telling it feels strange, feels like awkward, right? And I'm working on that, and that's the thing that I'm aware of. So again, it's understanding this habit of like, okay, don't show your card, keep things to yourself. Again, it's important to understand how they function. That doesn't mean that they can't love. For instance, I love my kids, that's not the point, but it's very hard for me to express this, and it should be easier with kids than with adults. So just to tell you the complexity of things. Another element, out of mind, out of sight, out of mind, obviously the connection will fade away when you're not around. Again, it's a defense mechanism of like, I need a distance. That's why long distance could be tricky with an avoidant. At the same time, it provides them that space. But for them, that will also reinforce their world. And in a way, if you have an anxious attachment style, the way you miss people is different than the way they miss people as avoidant partners. It's different because you don't have the same intensity. Because again, I'm going to say the word compartmentalize things. Yes, I did it properly. Things in a way that everything is a bit distant. Everything is at an arm length because it's safer. It feels safer. We feel in control. And so again, the distance help them control, help them feel safe. And that's what sometimes after a breakup, when you're in long distance relationship, you will find avoidant people shift to work, hobbies, and other distractions. And actually, when you think about it, that's also sometimes the tips that I give to people who have an anxious attachment style to deal with a breakup. It's not so much about distracting, but it's about like focusing on things you can control and build up a sense of confidence. So in a way, that's a healthy coping mechanism for them to shift on those activities. The problem is that they overdo it and forget completely the relationship. So again, it's always finding the right balance, because for avoidant who work with me, it's about like, okay, but you need to also look at yourself, analyze your attachment, and try to develop that sense of connection with your partner. With anxious people, we have to okay, now focus on work, focus on your hobbies. It's not so much about the relationship. So it's finding that right balance. And again, if you have any question on your situation, I forgot to mention, if you're not sure, if you're confused, I put a quiz, I put together an assessment, free assessment tool in the description of the video to assess whether getting back with your avoidant partner is something you could do, because I don't want you to waste your time trying to reconcile a relationship that has no chance. And if you want to discuss with me about your situation and get more granularity, because obviously an assessment is just an assessment, it gives you enough proof. But if you want to have a chat, have a look in the description. There's a link to book an assessment call with me, and the fee will be credited to any coaching you will buy with me afterwards if you want to work with me. Another element that you need to understand, which doesn't make sense actually when you have an anxious attachment style or even a secure attachment style, is the fact that intimacy is threatening. We grew up avoidant people, whether it's through our childhood or various relationships, with this idea of being intimate, which means by basically being an open book, is dangerous. If we are being caught, if people see who we are, they're going to make fun of us, they're going to push us away, they're going to dismiss us, and that's why we keep things to ourselves. Okay, so it's very unconscious, this driver, but it's this idea of, okay, it's very hard for me. There's a huge emotional cost for people who have an avoidant attachment style to build intimacy. It's possible, but you need to be aware of that. And it's always the struggle between balancing closeness and autonomy. You know, it's very much discussed. That's why it's very hard to understand and communicate with an avoidant when you have an anxious attachment style, because for you, you're an open book, right? Again, there's nothing wrong with that. You're an open book, and you expect your partner, why is that so hard for you to tell me you love me? Why? It's just like 3 words. But as I said, it's quite hard, and it's very, very tricky to understand. And that's how we operate. That's what we do. And actually, I don't know why I'm thinking about that, but I would love to interview avoidant people. So, because I always share my stories, but I think it would be interesting for you to also hear other stories. So if you have an avoidant attachment style, comment on this video, and I'd love to have a chat and discussing, almost having a podcast series of, the avoidants talking to each other, explaining their world. That would be, I think, interesting. So that's the thing around intimacy. The problem is, obviously, if you want to have a healthy, sustainable relationship, you need to develop intimacy with your partner. Otherwise, obviously, the relationship is superficial. It's not going to be sustainable, and it's going to be short-lived. Now, the other element as well is this element of conditional. So, in an ideal world, we want love to be unconditional. With our kids, it's usually unconditional. With our partner, it's different, right? And so there's always this negotiation or feeling controlled whenever they need to be affectionate, whenever they need to invest in the relationship. Again, it's this idea of turning off things. The problem, and that's very dangerous, is when there's specific conditions. And that's why you really need to be aware and really need to be realistic about the potential of this relationship. Because if the person loves you in a specific context with specific criteria, you really need to be clear about whether they're crossing any of your boundaries, whether they are meeting some of your non-negotiables or not. And you have to be clear about that, because sometimes people feel like, but I'm in love with them. Yes, but don't trust your heart. Trust your brain in those cases, because your heart is telling you to get stuck on the relationship that will never, ever meet your needs. And you are doomed. You are bound to fail. So it's very important to understand this. And also, that's why we feel we're working on eggshells. So my approach is to, again, creating that secure base, be the role model. If you have an anxious attachment style, you can improve on those aspects and trying to assess in return what will happen on their part. It's also about change, right? And obviously change requires both awareness and effort. By watching this video, you're kind of ticking the box of awareness. And I know I'm really grateful of this community because you're super engaged. And it's very interesting to discuss with you, whether it's on the comment section or on my assessment calls. And there's also an element of effort, right? Because it's always like, okay, I'm discovering this about myself. This is opening the door to a lot of things. Now it's, your turn to do the work, but it's also their turn to do the work, right? It's not so much about you, okay? You can control things, but it's important to assess that if they have an avoidant attachment style, they also need to heal their attachment wounds. I've done it. Anybody can do it. But they need to be aware and they need to put some effort. They need to have a form of motivation. By experience, the right relationship will force you to challenge the way you do things. Okay, maybe that's not actually healthy, that I can withhold things from my partner, that I keep things to myself, that I don't open up, etc., etc. Because at some stage, if you're an adult and you've matured and you can look at things properly with a bit of distance, you realize that's not healthy, right? 50% of people have a secure attachment style. So in your world, in your network, you'll find people where you see, okay, they behave differently. And that was the realization for me, looking at other people getting into committed relationship and feeling like, well, it seems easy. It seems they get something that I don't, right? So with the right support, with the right mindset, you can heal, they can heal. Now, your role in this relationship, your role in this process, this is not your role to heal their wounds. I'm going to repeat like almost 10 times because I think people, there's a tendency for people who have an anxious attachment style to be empath. Perhaps your partner or your ex has had a traumatic childhood or a traumatic relationship that changed them, that affected them. But the problem is you are the collateral damage of this. And as a partner, and even worse, as an ex, that's not your role to heal their wounds. You can be supportive. You can be always there if they need to discuss, but that's not your role. Your role is to develop that secure base. Your role is to create that foundation. It's active from your end, but it's passive from their point of view. You're not trying to get anything. You're not actively pursuing something. You're doing it for you. And by doing that, leaving enough time, being focused on that work, things will be different. So I'd like you to do a mental exercise, is to visualize yourself in 3 months having done the work, feeling less stressed, less triggered, having that clarity about the things that you want, the things that you don't want, feeling that you can message them without overthinking for 20 hours what you need to send. Feeling that when you wake up in the morning, it's not so much about, okay, what are they thinking? What are they doing? Just thinking that you're at peace. This visualization, it's not a dream. It's not something like out of the ordinary. It's something you can achieve if you have the right, it's not about mindset, the right support, the right structure. I call this creating the secure base, and that's what I do with my clients. If you want us to work together and achieve this secure base, let me know. Book a call with me and we'll discuss. If you have any question, let me know. And I forgot, if you like this video, don't forget to click on like. And you can also subscribe. That does help me a lot to push this content to more people and help more people. Take care of yourself. I'll see you next time. Bye.